Yeah, I think two things come quickly to mind, especially with your, so as ladies, as you grew up, you didn't know boys are different, right? So you will never have had the experience of being a boy. So your sons and your daughters is going to shake down different with both of them. But the boys need to study Proverbs. The strange woman spoken about in Proverbs. And you have this Proverbs 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, about how he goes near her house, right? And the father says, don't go near her house. It's just straight talk from father to son. So don't go near her house. And you can hear like the rebellious son, like, Dad, it sounds a little legalistic. I mean, I can't even go near her house. I'm not going to do anything wrong. And it's like, no, stay away. Just get out of there. Her feet go down to Sheol. Her feet go down to death. So you want that word to be in you because it is everywhere. And you have to say, this is how I'm going to think about it. I'm just going to run and get out of here. The second is, there's another line in Proverbs that speaks of this woman, this strange woman. And I can't remember the exact language of the text, but it's basically like, she doesn't know what she's doing. And you can pull on his masculinity there, right? You need to protect that woman who doesn't know what she's doing. This is the woman that it's like she's drunk. She doesn't know what she's doing, so you don't prey upon her, you protect her. But those are principles to be established in the young men. And then I think for the ladies, you go glory there, because there's going to be a part of them if they see a woman that's not wearing as much clothes as she should be wearing. There's still glory there. That's important to say. You can't look at them in lie and say, well, that's ugly. You say, no, it's a perversion of the glory. It's not as glorious as it should be. It's a diminished glory, and she needs to be thinking that way. So you're aiming at beauty, you're aiming at genuine glory, but let me tell you how to really glory, not how to faux glory. I think there's a great line from Pastor Wilson where he said, he kind of painted a picture. He seemed like maybe some kind of power couple, and the guy shows up and the lady's with him, but she's not wearing near enough clothes. And he says, a woman is to be her husband's glory, but not his arm candy. So teach the ladies that. You don't want that. There's actually a much better way to go about it. Other questions?
Do you think that there are subcategories of pornography? Like you have like the big pornography people looking at people having sexual intercourse outside of marriage, but do you think that there are subcategories that might be more subtle than that?
Yes, I think, so I've spoken pornography basically is the sexual perversion involved with a person and some kind of technology, some kind of computer, whatever it might be. But yes, you could go into various dimensions and subcategories of it. Those kind of perversions do exist. The enemy wants to still all kinds of twisted things in it. So, and that, feel free to speak with your parents about all that kind of stuff.
So you mentioned polygamy as one of the perversions of the dominion mandate. Now, how would you explain Jacob and like Rachel and Leah in that situation?
The polygamous situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not what it ought to be, and yet God draws straight with crooked sticks, right? I mean, I bought him with pomegranates. You look at the Bible, it's just fascinating. You're like, okay, well, this is interesting. This is not how we're supposed to go, but nevertheless it did. So I think of polygamy as being sub-Christian, but it's not sub-creational. Okay, so against nature. Romans 1, Paul the Apostle speaks of homosexuality as against nature. And then that's not what's going on with polygamy. So it's not against nature, still can produce fruit, still can produce offspring, but it is sub-Christian, meaning it's never been God's design. It's never been his plan. And I would go to Malachi chapter 2 for this, where he's speaking of the men of Judah who were actually entering into these polygamous relationships with strange women who were not a part of the covenant people of God. And he checks them on that by saying, did God not make one? It's Malachi 2, maybe around verse 12, something like that. Did God not make one? And I think what he's saying is one Adam and one Eve. Right? So look at his design. He made Adam and Eve, therefore homosexuality is out. He made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Eve and Julie and Susan. So polygamy is out.
Some of the arguments you use for like why love more than well, like fruitlessness.
yeah, I think there's definitely a connection. So the question is about birth control. I think there's definitely a connection. The exact identity of that connection, I'm not sure of. But there's certainly, we have become a society that has stripped procreation from sexuality. And birth control's had an involvement in that. Okay? Without speaking to the particulars of it, saying pro or anti, I'm not doing any of that. I'm just saying you're right to go, yeah, I can see how our society has been steeped. We've been trained. I remember when I started pastoring, there was a couple that came in, very sweet Christian couple, you know, and they come in, they're married, they're like 2 years in, and they're like, yeah, I think we're not going to have any kids, you know. And the pastor's like, oh yeah, well, I'd like to talk to you about that. So, and they picked up on it really quick. They left and they were like, oh, have we missed something? It's like, yeah, well, the very existence of this union is to be fruitful. That's what it's about, that's what it's for. And that's a signal where you have good Christians that have just kind of like the frog in the pot. We've just been boiled up to this point, and we do need to rethink what sexuality is actually about. Yeah, you know, when you say objective standard, that's a good way to put it. Now, a lot of people are going to think physical standard, though, right? So, like, let's put the ruler on the shorts, you know, or we're always going to think physical standard. And I'm not saying that there aren't physical standards. I'm just saying when it comes to modesty, I want to emphasize the inward, outward dimensions of the human life. Okay? I'm speaking to you right now, I'm a very physical person. I'm speaking to you because my soul is animating my body. Okay? If I were to die, that means my soul would go to be with the Lord, and my body would be laying on the floor. That movie would be very dramatic for you, I imagine. Very good for me. I would win, you would be shocked. But that's the way we work. Okay? And the same thing's going on in 1 Peter 3. He says, don't let your adorning be external, but have this beauty of an inner woman. Now the point is that inner beauty is going to express itself. I really believe this is the way, you know, you can find the way people operate physically is related to this kind of soul thing. So the primary thing I want to say about modesty, where you find a girl who is not being modest, she's letting you know something's wrong inside. And we should just know that. If it is, something's wrong. There she is. Pray for her. Ask the Lord to help her. Appropriate ways to talk about it. But you just draw a line. When I'm being immodest, something's wrong with my soul. Right? And if you start there, you're going to avoid the right kind of things. There's certain places you don't want to go because, you know, especially the time that girls become immodest is the time that they're growing up. And they're hopefully at a stage where you want that kind of stuff not to happen. You know, it doesn't happen when they're 2 and 3 and 4 when you would just say, go to your room, change your clothes. So now you want to be dealing with that. Whether you're a father or you're a brother in the Lord, you want to deal with that by going to the heart in the right kind of ways. And seeing that nurtured in the right direction where the outward appearance is going to change as this girl is reminded that there's a Father in heaven who loves her and cares for her and protects her. Kind of get all that stuff. Do we have more time? Or are we out?
We've got time for another question.
One more question?
So you talked about pornography that's purposeful, like your desires driving you on to do it. What about the unintentional, like ads on a computer?
Yeah, there's another little great line that I think I've read from, I think it was Mrs. Wilson, Pastor Doug Wilson's wife, something about, you know, help your husband and all this stuff, because she said basically, you know, he has to be annoyed all day long in our society by things like by magazines at the store or whatever. I don't want to hear this. I would say to young boys, that's the world you live in, right? You're going to find that things pester you and pop up around you for the rest of your life. You know, like you're going to come home and you're going to have trouble. Your tire's going to go flat. running smooth. If everything would have just done what you planned it to do, everything would be great. But then there's a problem, and you have to fix it. You have to deal with it. So the way that you find that immodest ladies keep popping up everywhere in this society, and you have to be like a man, you have to be like, be respectful and walk away, be respectful, turn your head, move on. That's actually something you're gonna have to do in life all the time. So I would tell men to man out there, to say, this is the way I'm gonna live. I won't be deterred, won't be thrown off. And you can cultivate that kind of self-control in other areas that will apply to this one, and vice versa. Okay? All right, thanks.